sponsors. I just wanted to say thanks on behalf of Parker Staffing. They had a lot of urgent goings on this evening, but they're a boutique staffing firm. They're actually conducting a search for us right now for a new executive assistant, and our fabulous partners will be with us in the future. And just, why we spend time asking our sponsors to speak to you is that they're really they're our partners. They are folks who are very community oriented. We work directly and personally with every single one of them. And so if you need to learn more, you can talk to them. You can also talk to us because we recommend them very highly. So my name is Michaela Kiner. In case I don't know you yet, my goal is kind of to know everyone in Greater Seattle, especially in the HR and people operations world. I'm the founder and CEO of Reverb, and started the firm about 5.5 years ago now. We basically do three things, all through the lens of helping leaders create healthy, inclusive culture. So we do HR consulting, primarily for startups and scale-ups. We also do custom management and leadership development from first-time frontline manager through executive. And we do executive coaching, which is really coaching for leaders at all levels. So again, that could be new manager, high potential individual contributor, all the way up to founders and CEOs. Happy New Year. It already feels like 2021 has been a long year. I recognize many things have happened, but this is our first meetup of the year. And you might notice, if anyone who was with us in the past will notice, we used to do this event jointly with Recruiting Bandwidth, and they rebranded as Bandwidth and are going in a slight different direction. And so we felt like this was a really important way to connect with the community, and we are now doing it solo as Reverb. So let me actually, now I'm going to pause. Kylie, are we doing some kind of mixer before Caroline and I kick off?
So we didn't have anything planned. I think if there's time at the end, we definitely could. What happened last time is we broke into breakouts, and then there were a couple people left in the ether that joined a little bit late. So yeah, let's leave that till the end if there's time.
Good call. Okay. Thank you. I will keep going. We don't want anyone hanging out in the ether because it's kind of weird. So I'm really excited to have Caroline. As Sarah mentioned, or Kylie mentioned, we were going to do this particular talk in November and got delayed for a couple of reasons. We're super excited to do it now. Caroline, before you introduce yourself, I'm just going to share a quote that Caroline said that really grabbed my attention when we were prepping, which was, "What if people actually liked their recruiters?" So I just want to let that float out in the ether for a second. Caroline's an author. She is a speaker. She is an executive recruiter. Caroline, say a few words about yourself before we dive in.
Okay, thank you, Michaela, much appreciated. And thank you to Kylie and everybody else that that invited me to do this last November, but I got concussion, so I couldn't go. But here we are today with a much clearer mind. I'm an executive headhunter. I do executive coaching as well. My company is based in both Montreal and in Vancouver. We work with international organizations, usually in digital and digital technology, entertainment, video games, mobile, specifically to help organizations advance. One of the movements that I have, and it is a movement, and things are progressing along with many other leaders and pioneers that really want to make the world a better place, is that we're in a very unique position to work with organizations to not only find their people, but we then coach them afterwards, and it's all part of that package. On a separate section as well, and I can send you the link to it as well, we have a workplace emotional intelligence assessment, and that is really exciting because it enables people to isolate exactly the areas that they need to start working on immediately, and that's available on the website, theforward.co. On top of that, we also support hiring managers and recruiters, and basically everybody that's involved in the hiring and the evolution of their people, specifically to help them understand where their brand is, how their product needs to evolve, how maybe their AI needs to evolve specifically for the time. So we have that consultancy as well. So we're pretty busy, and you know, through COVID, it hasn't let up because organizations need to adapt, as we all know. So it's an absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Awesome. Thank you, Caroline. In case you didn't get all of that, which I don't think you could have because Caroline is very
Talk
rapid.
fast.
Kylie will be sharing some links and information in the chat, as well as I think a couple of the documents that Caroline mentioned, but also the website where you can download those later.
Yeah.
Some of those are they're free tools, they're free worksheets and resources that you can use anytime. So Caroline, I like recurated my bookcase. There aren't that many books on it right now. I should have grabbed your book, but tell us, I know you've got, there you go. You've got it. Elephants Before Unicorns. So tell us just briefly the premise of the book, and then if you would describe for us what you mean by elephants and what you mean by unicorns.
So the premise of the book is that when I became EQ certified, I had this big eureka moment, which was, oh my gosh, it's not just about the individuals where their emotional intelligence needs to evolve. You need to think from a leadership and emotional intelligence perspective on how every single aspect needs to evolve. And I was always looking for that answer ever since working at Sony, launching the PlayStation in the 90s, which aged me already, specifically because I was sitting around and just thinking to myself, I can see that there are all of these challenges with each of these individuals. You know, why was this person hired? They're not really contributing, they're not mixing, they're whatever the issues that were bubbling up inside my head. And I just remember thinking, there's something really wrong with hiring, retaining, leadership development, and how that incorporates with the product. This book, Elephants Before Unicorns, Emotionally Intelligent HR Strategies to Save Your Company, is really about organizations waking up and not relying, even though we need to still, relying on HR to provide all those solutions. Individuals and leaders are able to evolve themselves, and this is a handy dandy kind of guide to help any leader work out how they want to evolve. And it's almost like a template for organizations as well to be able to do that if they don't hire external organizations to do that. And the reason why I called it Elephants Before Unicorns, I was in Washington, DC a couple of years ago speaking with the World Bank, and I took the World Bank out, not the World Bank, the whole World Bank, but I took somebody out from the World Bank for dinner, and I said to them, you know, we've got all of these elephants in our organizations that nobody's ever talking about, which means that nobody's able to get the unicorns that they really need to help evolve their organization. And therefore, and that's how the whole idea came about. But with the elephants, it really is the elephant in the room, the issues that are, you know, when you're in an organization, you can see things just aren't changing because of the culture or because of the management or because of attitudes or whatever, many reasons. This is just the guide really to help individuals understand how they can evolve from an appreciative inquiry mindset through to coaching people and moving forward that way.
Fantastic. So I'd love to get a quick show of hands. It could be your real hand or your virtual hand. It really doesn't matter to me. Caroline mentioned a couple of things. So anyone ever seen hiring not go well? Anybody?
Anyone?
Ever seen onboarding not go well? Leadership development not go well? Yeah. So I think we have a trend here. So very good, Caroline, that you're helping us tackle these things. Let me ask you to define a few terms, because while I know that, I mean, EQ has now been in the lingo for, I believe it's now decades, but I also think, you know, maybe our interpretations of it are different, or we have various evolutions in our understanding. So can you just, like, in short, when we're talking tonight about EQ, what should we be thinking of?
So EQ is emotional quotient. So it's a bit like an IQ. You know, you might know that your IQ is 120. You're going to know that your EQ might be, you know, something completely different. And what we've got here is with EQ, it really is just a number or whatever it is. Your emotional intelligence is actually something that can evolve all the time. You can check in with yourself at any time and say, I didn't show much empathy in that meeting. I really need to show more empathy, because if I'm not, people aren't they're not going to gravitate towards the ideas because I'm just being a jerk, for want of a better phrase. And one of the things is that if you're not consciously working on your emotional intelligence on a day-to-day basis, for example, one of the people in this group was saying just how unhappy they were, not unhappy, but desperately frustrated that they only got a small mocha coffee from their partner, and because that person's need was, I need to keep on going, I need to keep on moving, and what have you. When there are other ways of being able to focus on that particular emotion and maybe look at it in a completely different way. And I'm not I'm not picking at that particular person, but it was just a great example of just something so basic. But when you're looking at it from an organizational lens, I've created what I call the workplace EQ diagnostic, and what it does it's in the book, but you can actually access it for free online, which Kylie will hopefully be able to share. And what it is that you're able to understand precisely in that moment, either by your responses to the questions, and it's a very quick 5-minute diagnostic, and you can get the rest of your people to do exactly the same thing, and then you're able to understand what are the true elephants in your organization that you need to adapt and evolve, in terms of how you're managing your hiring. Are your hiring managers able to manage everything in the right way? Is your product associated with how you manage your external brand, your internal brand, your communications? Do you make people feel safe? All of the different things with regards to DEI and the challenges that in particular that have been around for a very long time, but only really surfaced in quite a dramatic way last year, thanks to COVID, thanks to everything that is going on. So you really need to do a health check. It's like a mental health check of your organization and how you can evolve it, and then tying it in with your mission, etc., etc. So when I talk about EQ, it might be about an individual's EQ, which isn't going to be helping very much, or it's going to be about an organization's EQ, maybe even a team's emotional intelligence or emotional quotient. And always having that learning mindset that is so important, whereby we are able to see that there is something wrong, and you're able to then challenge it. And hopefully there is a curious enough organization, or you have people in your organization that are curious to make things better and to make the world a better place and to make their product a better place and a safer place, for that ideal environment where people can be productive and creative and innovative and drive their organizations forward. But as you know, just that whole list of things that I just said, that's a lot, and the balance is so hard. So that's why I put that diagnostic together, so you're able to see it right there and then you can collaborate and work on how to make it better.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Caroline. And people hopefully see there's some chatter in the chat. Kylie is throwing the diagnostic and other tools into the chat.
Thank you.
It's all there if you need it. One more, and thanks really for defining that and getting us all on the same page. I think I might hear little people in the background, which is totally fine. Or you might.
I don't have any little people anymore.
No, that's
They're
okay.
all big people now.
My daughter came earlier and was showing us her avocado toast, but I don't think she made it on camera. Thank goodness. So Caroline, I think a lot of us understand EQ when it's like the prickly person, the person who yells, the person that leaves bodies in the wake, doesn't suffer, fools gladly, right? I'm using these cliches that we use to mean
right,
like nasty, toxic people.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really much more than that. So when you talk, for instance, about the EQ of a team, what are some of the things we might be uncovering, or what are some of the things that will point to sort of like better versus worse EQ of a team that you're working with?
Love that question, because the answers are going to be endless. And what you're looking for is, because you could easily have everybody fill out an EQ assessment and a 360 assessment, because I use the EQI 2.0 by MHS specifically for this purpose. And if you're evaluating the team and you're then evaluating where do they need to go, where does this team need to go, what problems do they need to solve, and how that interacts with everything else that's happening within the organization, you're then able to see, do people have such such a high self-regard that they don't want to get involved in certain areas? In which case, that's the elephant in the room, and you're able to have that conversation with somebody to see whether or not they want to be able to adapt and evolve. When you look at, let's look at emotional self-awareness, which is understanding one's own emotions. You might have a team and you may find that 50% are so data-oriented and data-driven versus, let's say, data-influenced, that they're unable to communicate the story effectively to ensure that everyone is able to be on the same page. And it can just get back to saying what you were saying, is that they can be prickly or standoffish because they just haven't got that common language. They haven't had that vulnerable exposure of everybody understanding where they are on the EQ ground, where they are, where they need to go, and then look at building that ship. And you do the same, Michaela, with regards to leadership development, but you're looking at trying to get everybody as a whole together to be able to say, okay, we can see that there are these issues, and to be comfortable doing that, which, as we know, is really, really hard for the majority of people, for whatever reason. But when people go through, and I kind of have these different these different stages, and the first stage is that people have to understand themselves. Once you understand yourself and what your limitations are, and how maybe you've had these blind spots, etc., that once you realize that, and you then have a 360, which is stage 2. As you know, a 360 is very helpful because then you're getting the feedback on the areas that need to evolve, and then you're looking at that person and ideally extending it to the team, or preferably the entire organization. They're then looking specifically to see how these people are then able to get on board with the mission. And I did a podcast quite a while ago. I don't know in the States if you have this product called Native Shoes. It's a Vancouver-based product, and the CEO was on my podcast. And I said to him, so, how, when you did that whole process of people understanding who they are, how they need to evolve, and then how they can integrate with the company mission, or the company mission integrates with them, then it's the remarkable thing happened to him, which is that one of the guys said, or one of the people said, I don't think I want to work in this company anymore. I think I've decided that I'm going to work in an agency. And it's like, good. For whatever reason, that's good. Moving on, and the rest of the team is able to then, push forward as tight as a collective can potentially be. So, the whole team EQ thing is a lot like an individual or an organizational EQ activity. You need to have the individual. There are individual leadership development potential understood, so then they can then integrate it properly and to know how they're actually going to be able to make the impact.
Yeah, that's great, and thank you for digging into that for us. So probably most of the folks on this event, and most of the folks that we tend to work with are startups and scale ups. They're scrappy, they're moving fast.
Yes.
Like a one-person HR team or a one-person HR/recruiting team. What's like the scrappiest application of these concepts that would be helpful to people in roles like that? I know I didn't prep for this question because I
know I love this question.
Take your time.
I know I love this question. And I think what I like about that question is that you're right. Everybody's looking for a scrappy approach. How are they going to be able to identify what it is in their organization that they need to adapt? And again, I think it's the workplace EQ diagnostic, because you're able to see at a glance, if you're really honest with yourself, and maybe have some other people do it as well. What is it? And it takes 10 minutes, if that. What is it that you need to do? You then find out what you need to do in your organization. And that it's like opening Pandora's box then. Because then people, and I just send this out to my clients freely. It's like, just go find out, see how you can make things better for yourselves, and see where those elephants are in your organization that aren't being spoken about. And listen to the people that have just joined, listen to the people that maybe have changed their jobs a few times within the organization. What's going on with them? There may be some very, very valid reasons, but sometimes it can be a personality. You know what it's like. And so I think it's really important to just start at the beginning, just with the workplace EQ. I'm not making any money out of that. It's really a service because I want the world to be a better place. And if you want to go further to make it, to almost like label yourself, as I like to call it, as an emotionally intelligent organization, then it's really a case of saying, okay, how are we going to do this on a bigger scale, so we don't lose sight of where we are, we don't burn these people out, we aren't just focused on the fiscal aspect, which, as we know, is really important. Otherwise, people aren't going to be paid, especially during COVID. But it will enable conversations to start, and I think that is. Since we are human, that's, if you can have transparent, vulnerable conversations without ego. I know that's hard a lot of the time, but that is the way forward.
Great. So if I'm the head of people at a 25-person company, I could literally take the assessment myself, so I understand it. Mm-hmm. I could, assuming they're interested in the health of their organization, I could ask my executive or leadership team to also take it. It sounds like there would be some debrief and dialogue that I could lead. And then if I'm comfortable, I could actually cascade this throughout the organization. Is that
yeah.
Right?
Yes, you could. But when it gets to the cascading of within the organization, you're going to be looking at working with us in the particular to create something. So there can be a report. It means that there's a the diagnostic provides a lot of data, and you've got to go through that data and look at all the different points. So that's the only point where there is that business perspective from forward. But yes, you're going to be able to, if you've got 10 people to be young, scrappy and hungry and go on that link, they're going to get the data and they're going to be able to talk about it and find their own way forward in which is important. We all know that all of the different areas in human resources, when it comes to talent attraction, the company brand, the company product, how that relates to what's being done, the tools that you have in an organization, so people don't get frustrated. All of the different aspects are just so important to ensure that those people are engaged and I'm going to sound like a cliche, doing their best work within the organization for the people and for all of the different KPIs that an organization runs on.
Yeah, wonderful. So you chose to look at organizations through a lens of EQ. You could have chosen any lens. You could have chosen leadership empathy. You could have chosen executive presence, psychological safety, right? Like we could go on and on. What made you choose EQ, and why do you think that is sort of foundational to the health and success of companies or of teams?
And I really, I love that question because it makes me think about why I did it. Why did I do this those few years ago before COVID went crazy? Because the book came out just 2 months before COVID, so I was pretty lucky. What I'll do is I'll go through the book very quickly. Don't worry. It's not going to be a J.K. Rowling reading of 2 chapters or anything like that, but I'll just go through the emotional intelligence lens. And this is where I had my big aha, which is you're looking at self-perception, self-expression, interpersonal decision-making, stress management. These are the different aspects that if you've got one of those spokes of the wheel off, the whole thing collapses. And it was just a wonderful image, terrible image actually, but it was a wonderful image to be able to see, how are you going to get this machine? How are you going to get the wheels to work optimally to create the right environment? We were always looking to create the right environment. We've all got that idyllic memory in our minds of when, you know, the people were right, the product was right, the environment was right, everything was right. And often we look back at, you know, with rose tinted glasses, and we think, hold on a second, what was it that was right about that? And it's usually about the mission. It's usually about everybody being on board with it. And when people are off or whatever, it doesn't matter, because the vehicle is so strong, so robust, the movement is so strong that it doesn't actually matter. And you know, we all know that there are organizations like that, and they succeed very, very well regardless. But in this particular space, where I was looking at an organization stress management, how do they adapt? How are they agile? How do they move forward? How do they manage their decision making? How flexible are they? We look at flexibility, for example, from an emotional intelligence lens from the past year. Holy cow, how flexible have we had to be for the past year? And you know, it's been constant, and how much work we need to do that. But here's the kicker: you can't just be focusing on, you know, the flexible environment. You also have to think about, and I was looking here in terms of self-perception, self-regard, self-actualization, emotional self-awareness. If you've got all of those aspects kind of balanced with, for example, flexibility, they're going to be able to make those decisions. And we're talking about decision making. It's going to be so much more powerful. That's the phrase I want to use right now, because quite frankly, if you miss any of these different aspects, which actually happens all the time, we can't help it. You know, there's only so much we're able to focus on at any one time, and we are always led to these big goals that need to happen, and then all of a sudden priorities are just thrown in the back. But when you can look at the mental and social, if you can look at the emotional and mental, social and emotional operating system, not only of the individual, but also the organization and the teams, it's going to create an organization that really focuses on each other's mental health, is able to work on and you know, from a societal perspective, ensure that you're creating products that are going to be rather outstanding, that actually fit the needs, rather than, oh, we've just got to make the budgets or whatever it is. But it takes an entire ship to do that. It takes a CEO to have that really, really strong opinion, or it takes a very influential HR person to be able to influence their C-suite to be able to do this. There's a lot of noise, as we know, about employee advocating, and how that kind of citizenship is now becoming more popular. But and I do predict there being more activity in that particular area, where I think there's going to be a bottom-up effect, where the C-suite are going to be influenced by their people. And we've seen that happen, especially last year during BLM and various activities, when organizations internationally were melting down. In India, people, due to COVID, people were melting down, saying that they weren't going to be working with other castes because they didn't want to. They wanted to protect their own. Lots of different things happening internationally, and it really does require everybody to demonstrate great leadership, empathy, flexibility, and a mission. As we know, that's the most important aspect, and being able to adapt in the moment, especially when when stuff like COVID happens, and we're going through our second year of it now.
Yeah. And I want to clarify, because I know you. And so for folks who don't like, when you say noise, I mean, I'm hearing it as distraction, but it's certainly not meaning that it isn't important to hear, you know, from all employees, or that we want to, you know, be dismissive of things that are grassroots. I think what you're saying is it just requires that much more focus and attention, because really pressure is coming at leaders more and more from all sides. And so they have to be able to stick to that mission while gathering input and hearing from all the different parties and all the different stakeholders, including, of course, their employees.
Well said. Thank you for
Yeah.
summarizing.
So I'm going to shift a little from EQ, and I have some questions that are a bit more specific about talent and about onboarding. But before I do, I will have time for Q&A at the end, but I do want to pause and see if anybody has questions at this stage for Caroline, just about the model, about the elephant versus the unicorn, about this EQ assessment. So let's open it up for just a moment.
I have a quick question for you. When you do the assessment for your team, do you use it also for training purposes or just for the culture to find out if everybody is balanced in the company?
Great question. Well, it's thank you. The diagnostic gives you the data to be able to identify where you need to go, and what's missing, what you're doing well, where you're not going, where things aren't going well. And I think the answer to that question is that it's an opener to have conversation and to have dialogue and to find out, and then to A/B test what's going to work and what's not going to work, and to start from there. But it really is the beginning, because as I always say, and I think this is just a natural thing, it's like from understanding comes growth, and that's how you then able to move forward from that particular point. But it will give you the themes and the trends that are really, really important, and you might surprise yourself with some great news. And in other areas, like, oh, we really need to deal with this. In which case, mission accomplished.
Great, thank you. Anybody else?
Sorry, did I answer your question?
All right, I've learned to wait through the awkward silence, so that was awkward enough. We're going to keep going. Caroline, you talked about making onboarding fun, and something that we've heard from clients ever since COVID hit, people had a lot of consternation, like, how is this going to affect the interview process? And it's all virtual and we don't meet people. I don't know if this is true for you. What we ended up hearing was that the actual interview process didn't feel that changed. I mean, other than the fact that it's on Zoom, it didn't feel that changed, or companies didn't feel they had to do things that differently. It was really when it came to onboarding, like, how do we take this person, we've never met them in live, they've never met us, we're not in an office, everything's, a meeting or a video call. So the challenge seemed to really be about how do we make onboarding more effective during COVID. You've actually taken it a step further to say we can make onboarding fun. So I want to see if you can share a little bit about that and how we can think about that, especially as things are still remote. And yes, the vaccine is coming, but we're going to be in this world for a bit longer, right? We've all recognized that.
So how to make onboarding fun? What we fail to often realize as human beings, and I sound like David Attenborough when I say that, we fail to realize is that we all want to do a great job at what we're doing. And too often we're thrown in the deep end of an organization without any real introduction or real transparency with the people that you need to work with, specifically to ensure that you're able to do a great job and you're reaching your best potential, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the onboarding fun, make the onboarding fun aspect is pretty broad. You're onboarding people from a marketing sense from the very beginning with your product. Then it's your website, your company, what it all stands for. And I'm getting into marketing talk and all of those things. And then it's the very first experience they have with the recruiter. If that recruiter is fun, maybe, or a joy to work with, let's use that instead, a joy to work with, reliable, they respond, they're friendly, they're courteous, etc. They're going to have a really positive, you're onboarding right then. They're going to be more positive at that particular moment in time. And you're looking at your hiring managers having the same principles, having those different aspects within the organization. But onboarding, and the typical term of onboarding is, oh, this person has just signed their contract and they're going to be joining us in 3 weeks time, and whoopee, let's get a computer, let's send them the data for them to fill everything in before they start. Otherwise it's going to be 2 weeks of putting in data online. The difference here is that we are all humans and we need to understand exactly what we're doing with everybody else. Too often, people are, as I said right at the very beginning, they're dropped in at the deep end, and they are having to translate everything that they are hearing with their own lens, of experience. So let's say they bring some baggage over. They've just worked at major technology company, and they're moving to another major technology company. Both of those organizations have different cultures. They have different ways of doing things. They may have a way where they'll say, oh yeah, just reach out to me whenever. And they end up having a quick conversation and not really knowing what's happening. And the person is going to be drowning. So the formula that I have, and this is what we use when we place people in organizations all the way through to the coaching that we do with teams, is that what we do is day one that they have signed that document, and I'm not talking about, you know, somebody sending over a big box of, you know, congratulations box or anything like that. I mean, that would be fun. I would love that. But what I would say is that in this particular instance, you're talking about saying, okay, we're now going to be supporting you as a new hire for the next 100 days. It specifically so you are able to be successful. You're able to create those small wins. You're able to, or quick wins, I should say. You're able to integrate with the people that you're working with, and everybody is going to be included with you. And this is where it probably sounds a little bit laborsome, but here's the thing. You're looking at the people that were probably hiring that person, and you know, let's say there are 5 stakeholders. You're looking at those 5 people and maybe a couple of others that might be involved in what I call a kickoff meeting. So right at the very beginning, usually on day 4 of that person joining, after they've done their paperwork and, you know, they've been drinking from the fire hose and everybody's just going, oh my God, I don't know what's going on here. That person will have just had enough time to forge some kind of opinion about the organization, the people, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is an opportunity on day 4 to turn that into the right direction, because I remember I joined a company once and I was there and I went, oh my gosh, I don't think I can handle it here for another 6 months. I ended up being there for 5 years, but you know, I did not enjoy it. I know I was yearning and craving for something just like this. And so what you're looking at is kickoff meeting. You're determining in that meeting what the opportunities are, what the challenges are, where the areas for development might be, what people would like to see by the end of the year, for example. You know, what is it that is going to be most realistic? It's all about appreciative inquiry at that particular time, and whatever their reality and sense of urgency is on various things. And people can change their minds. So then from that particular time, but then on day 4, the coach then comes in. Every single week they're working with a coach, and then to understand how they're working with the 30, 60, 90-day plan, and you know, working along that line. Then at the 50-day mark, we do the same thing all over again. And the reason why I did this, and I really want to share this data point, and it's not in my book, for the simple reason that I discovered the trend after the book had been submitted. But the situation with doing it at the 50 days mark, again, with exactly the same agenda, is that you don't go look back retrospectively and start pointing fingers saying, this didn't happen, this didn't happen. It's all about, okay, let's do this again. What's important? What's changed? What is our big goal now? And it's to create that sense of transparency and to avoid conflict, negative conflict. So people understand, actually things have changed a lot. And then they're able to understand how they need to evolve. And the reason why I noticed this trend is that halfway through the 100 days, there was this nervousness from everyone, and I couldn't work out what was going on. And it's because things change. So I always recommend that to ensure that, and it isn't just a case of just knocking on somebody's door and saying, hey, how's it going? You know, you really need to have that group session whereby everybody is saying, so what are the goals? And you're able to see how priorities have changed, because priorities change and sometimes people don't know, or sometimes, you know, people won't take that priority seriously for whatever reason. So, and then right at the very end of the 100 days, still continuing with the weekly coaching and an EQ assessment, I should say, at the very beginning, they then have a 360 at the end. And that 360 enables all of the stakeholders again to get involved and see how so they can see how their contributions actually impacted that person's success or not. And this is where it's fun. When you see the feedback that everybody gets and the involvement that they have in a new hire being successful, and that's not the phrase that I would use, oh, well, this person's successful and I'm happy and that was fun. They actually become highly motivated for that person to become successful. And it's a bit of an under the radar thing that's done, but it works, and it's very, very, the results are great. So that is what I mean by fun, because when things aren't fun, they're usually painful, they're stressful, they're all of these different things, but we want work to be fun. We want to be successful. And that's why I call it fun.
Oh, that was amazing. You told a real life story about me, which was went from major tech company A to major tech company B. You can just look at my LinkedIn profile. But I was miserable in my first 30 days at company B. Like I was actually coming home and telling my husband, like, I've sold my soul. And, it was really interesting because somebody did not, check in with me or coach me or assess me or do anything for me. I called a really trusted friend and colleague, and I was like, I don't know about this thing. And he actually talked me off the ledge and was the one that was like, first 30 days can be really rough. And, there's like kind of wait and see. Right. And so I didn't jump ship, but I could have, right? I could have.
And lots of people do. The amount of times as a headhunter, I will get the calls or the emails from various people. And that's what also made me think this is wrong. Because people were, after they'd been there for a week or two, they'd say, I've made a terrible decision. Or my boss isn't allowing me to do what he said he would do, or whatever the situation. It's like, well, that's because you've both come at it from a completely different perspective. You've got to create this nurturing environment. Otherwise, people just won't feel successful, and they're going to feel very uncomfortable.
Yeah. I wanted to share a few of the things that we've heard from our startup clients that seem to also be working during onboarding. One is having, and it's probably in a smaller company, the founder or CEO do a little video about the culture and values and get that out to people as part of their onboarding. Because in the pre-pandemic world, people would have, seen the senior leaders, maybe seen the CEO in action, in person, and you observe, right? The easiest definition of culture that I like is how we do things around here. And if I'm showing up at work every day and I'm working around people, I'm constantly observing how they do things, whether that's how do they dress? Do they come to a meeting on time? Do they eat lunch, in front of other people while they're talking with their mouth full? Whatever. And like some of these things, they matter, right? They sound silly, but they matter. There's bigger ones. How do we deal with conflict? What are the elephants? What don't we talk about? But I think this culture video is a really fun idea. The second one yeah, thank you. The second one that people seem to be doing more of, if they weren't already, and you mentioned this, Caroline, but this idea of an onboarding plan or a launch plan where I'm going to actually write down and let that individual know, here are the different people you should reach out to and meet. Here's your new hire, mentor, or buddy. Here are all the different tools you need access to. Here's the training you should take. That new hire can use that as a guide, and that you can share that with all of the people who are mentioned in that onboarding plan to say, hey, everybody, right? Caroline's starting next week. You're part of her onboarding plan. Make sure she knows about this thing. Make sure you answer this question or talk to her about this project, right? So I'm trying to get a top down and bottoms up to get everyone connected a little bit more intentionally. The last one too, and if you're not fortunate enough to have access to someone like Caroline or a coach, the HR partner, people ops person or recruiter can still try to do that 30, 60, and 90-day check-in. Ask a few questions like, how are you doing? Do you know your goals? Everything okay with are you seeing your manager? Are you getting the one-on-one time with your manager? Is your mentor or buddy, helping you answer questions, right? So we can do some of these things in kind of a light touch way if we don't have all the resources and extra support to invest.
Yeah, you can, and you can have it as part of your cultural like manifesto, where it's like, we guarantee that we will have this type of onboarding for each and every person to ensure that they know how they're able to work and contribute and get things done and so on and so forth. You know, I think if everybody signs up and buys into it, then it just becomes part of the way.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, and if you know, throw it in the chat if there's something that you're doing in your organization that others can learn from. I mean, everybody here is an expert, right? It's not just me and Caroline, so we'd love to know what
Yes.
you're doing. I mean, I think, Caroline, my last sort of formal question for you. I always ask this when we have talent and recruiting specific folks. Like, I feel like we've had this conversation at multiple events year over year. It's extremely helpful. How do the startups and scale ups compete with large organizations for talent? And I actually want to say, I think especially during COVID, there are a lot of benefits and advantages to working in these kind of smaller and less bureaucratic organizations. What do you think those are, and how can companies like that really use that to their advantage while they're attracting talent?
Good question. Other than throwing equity at people, which really helps, the story's got to be absolutely outstanding. When you're looking, you need an outstanding story. You need really great communicative leaders and hiring managers that are going to be part of that interview process, that are whip smart and are able to that really inspire those people. I mean, that people join people, not necessarily companies, and they join the product in that particular sense. And I think if you look at the startups and those that are scaling, they're usually doing something new or they're doing something better. And that's what, when it's about let's say the war for talent, or for getting the better, for being able to get the right talent, that story is going to be great. But it's one of those things where if you can't match the salary and the compensation expectations, people want to be part of a founding team. So for startups, they want to be part of that. I've seen people move countries for that opportunity. Equity is the next thing. So if you're still very small, equity is a really big deal, but it all aligns with what the product is, what the vision is, what the leaders, how they communicate with people directly. It's all about the story. It really is all about the story. But you will always find 90% of the people will want something safe, especially now in COVID. But there are people, and I'm finding this, and I'm happy to share this, which is that there are more mature people out there that have had their equity and they've had their the shares and what have you from their organizations, and they've built their houses and done whatever. They will want to start again. They want that. They want the thrill of it. They want that challenge. So sometimes it isn't about competing. You're trying to create and demonstrate something that is going to be truly exciting for them. So again, you're looking at emotional intelligence. What's the story? People buy things just like they start a new company. They buy things because they are due to their emotions. There's all of that connections. For some it might be fear, for some it might be love. With fear, it's like, no, I'm safe here at this company, I'm not going to budge because COVID, there's just too much going on. And that's a fair enough situation. But there's always going to be a satisfactory percentage, especially if they're in the leadership roles, to bring people on at that senior level. And then if we look at more junior people, we know for a fact that tech companies in particular, any fintech, whatever organization that's surviving and thriving now, they're going to be able to continue and do particularly well. And those people, you need that great story, and you're able to use that to your advantage. So this is where recruiters need to be storytellers, hiring managers need to be storytellers. It's not just a fact-checking thing because, oh, well, of course people are going to join me. They won't. They have choices, especially in Seattle, especially in Vancouver, Toronto, San Francisco, etc.
Yeah, I guess I do have a final question, and then we'll open it up, or maybe we'll do some breakout groups. So what I've found has really changed since the summer is that while some companies used to have a focus on diversity recruiting, or maybe for a particular role, now I think in a great way, most organizations really have goals to increase diversity and increase diverse recruiting across the board. What I find when I do talk to recruiters is everyone's now like, yes, I can do diverse recruiting. But in my personal experience, that really does take networks and connections to different communities. And
Yes.
so not all recruiters are equally well positioned to do it.
No.
If folks are looking for that kind of help, what are a couple vetting questions, or how do they know if a recruiter is really going to be successful for them?
Oh, I love that. I think this is, again, an under the kind of radar way of going about it, but really trying to understand what their level of curiosity and what their level of curiosity is, and how good they are actually trying to find solutions. Because when you can say, so what was the last challenge that you had in your organization? How did you solve it? And you're going to hear something that may hopefully be relevant to that particular time and place in society or the economic situation or whatever, whereby they were able to say, our focus was this, and this is how I did it. But you're looking for curiosity. As we know from a recruiting perspective, recruiters burn out. They can be very negative. They can feel like they're just doing the tried and tested way. But when you can speak to a recruiter where they say, yeah, I identified that I needed to go to all of these different conferences where there are these different types of people that go there. And usually if you've got a larger organization, you're able to, your recruitment team or your recruiters or HR or your hiring managers are able to spend a certain amount of their personal time going down this route. But if you're a startup scaling, the steam is coming out of your ears, and you really need to try and identify how young, scrappy and hungry, let's not use the young so much, but the scrappy and hungry, those people are to try and solve the problems, and just have that conversation with them. So we really want to increase our diversity and inclusivity and equity plan. This is how we are right now. How would you scale it up? Just ask them the question outright, and you'll be surprised.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, this has been amazing. So I think everyone can tell Caroline has a wealth of knowledge across talent assessment, coaching, EQ, onboarding. I'm sure I'm barely scratching the surface. So let's barely, probably like 1% of what you do. Yeah, I'd love to open it up, and I hope some people have questions.
I hope so too.
Caroline, take advantage of your wisdom here. You can raise a hand again, on camera, off camera, come off mute, whatever you like.
I feel like I'm the only one asking questions here, but
Jennifer, thank you.
You hit when somebody says diversity and how do you recruit on diversity? My question is, have you not been trained when you first started to become a recruiter to interview people equally?
No.
And we have learned, I know we have learned, but they don't. Just like that we have learned that there's a difference between a sourcer, a recruiter, and a professional recruiter. There's all different levels of different people out there. So what I want to know is who's the person who's supposed to be training these other recruiters in-house as well as outside help in order to train on diversity? Do they know the questions that they're supposed to ask? Do they know what they're not supposed to ask? Do they know how to look for it? And that's my biggest question. I was 29 years in the making. I don't know any different except how to interview on diversity because I was taught that way.
Nice.
But nobody knows that difference. And so when people start talking about interviewing, or when employers say, but I really want someone who can do this and I want someone who can do that, that I'm not going to work with you because that's obviously not a company I want to represent. How do you train that person?
That's a really good question. And I think, before you hire that person, I mean, let's look in an ideal world. In an ideal world, you're going to be hiring somebody where you've already had these great conversations with already, and they've got that curiosity, and they really want to drive a recruitment practice that is going to be ethical and so on. So those people, sorry, please excuse me, my dog has now started barking. Those people are going to be golden, because it's not just about, okay, we've got this person in next. It's not a numbers game. Well, for a lot of recruiters, it's a numbers game. To find a recruiter that actually really likes people, and those people people really like recruiters, and they think outside of the box, and they really want to contribute and do something that is beyond those expectations. That, I think, is the number one thing. You're wanting to hire the right kind of human being for that. In terms of training, I think it's the same for anyone. I mean, if a recruiter doesn't have that intrinsic desire internally for other humans, maybe they shouldn't be in the job. But let's say they want to learn, they want to become even better, they have a learn it all mindset, they want to ensure that their company has the best range of people, because they know that diversity is actually going to make their products, their culture, etc., significantly better. That's where all organizations need to train their people. It's like expecting an accountant to not update their accreditations and affiliations on an annual basis. With recruiters, it's the same kind of thing, because you're dealing with very, very important people.
Yeah, I that's a great response. And I think there's another aspect to it, which is, and we at Reverb have been doing our own work to figure out how do we also find and attract and engage a more diverse team of consultants and staff. And sometimes we're limited by who we know or the networks that we've built in the past. And that network may or may not be very diverse, right? I think it just depends on that particular recruiter, maybe what geography they're in, what kind of roles and populations they've worked with historically. And this is where I've personally seen the differences. There are some recruiters who have kind of, built that kind of community or done that kind of outreach to underrepresented and underestimated communities. And they might have been doing that for years or decades. And so they automatically have a more diverse, pool of candidates and relationships and connections that potentially than another recruiter. And this is not a critical, like one is good and one is bad, but it's sort of like, if I call you today, what's your starting point? Do you have those relationships, or are you in the process of building them, or are you like not at all, right? You're just engaging with whatever network you have. And again, it's not a right or wrong, but I think of it as like I'll give you a different example. When we think about communities, our team, we were just doing a little research, and we stumbled upon this group called Black in HR. I don't think the group has even existed for all that long, but we never knew about that group. And it is a community you can get to know. It is a community where you can pay to meet people or post jobs. So had you asked me a year ago, I didn't know that existed. Whereas now I feel like, okay, I'm better informed. This is one more talent pool, right? And so that's the question I'm asking recruiters, I guess, is what are the various talent pools that you're connected with or tapping into? And everyone has a different response.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that was me on the soapbox. What else?
Staying informed is what makes us different. Yes, learn it all.
I have a question for you.
Mindset,
So
Jennifer.
I do find that in organizations, it can be a challenge to make senior leaders understand that they are all part of the recruiting process. They are all part of that marketing.
Yeah.
Any recommendations on how to do that more effectively, and for senior leaders to kind of cross-mentor each other in that way?
That's a great question. Do you want to answer that, Michaela? Or shall I? It's up to you.
No, go for it.
Okay. It's all about people understanding that they are salespeople at the end of the day, and how those hiring managers and the execs, how they make those candidates feel is going to impact the company brand. And I think once they understand that, and I've got a video on my website just in the first, it's like a 2-minute video that talks about that. If people don't realize that how they communicate actually impacts the way that they feel, and it isn't just about themselves, it's about the company and whether or not they'll buy from them. British Telecommunications did something quite recently, not quite recently, years ago, it's in my book, about which is like the #1 telephone service provider in the UK. Used to be a monopoly. Anyway, they understood that the candidate experience, the journey was so poor from the time that they went onto the BT website to, you know, everything on the back end through to the experience with hiring managers, that people decided to disconnect from British Telecommunications. So when they realized that they were actually losing customers from that, and losing advocates, and losing the people that are fundamentally buying your product and recommending your product, you know, how you make people feel will jeopardize your business, and it jeopardized BT's business significantly, and they had to overhaul it. So it's a similar kind of thing, and they need to understand just how powerful and influential they are. People might not care, it's like, it's only one person, but it's people, word of mouth is a big thing. So they are very influential marketing people, and you just need to have that conversation with them. Find the resources, you know, in the media that they might read, so that they then, you know, think it's their idea.
Yeah, I think that's such a great example. And, you know, this could be the whole other conversation about how do we tie your employment brand, right? And make sure it's connected to the reality of what you're like as an employer. This was maybe a year or two back now, but people might have seen the Gillette video about the best a man can be, and it shows men, you know, basically not being macho, like being caring and being fathers, and, you know, breaking up bullying and teaching their little boys not to beat up on each other. And my daughter, who's now 16, she's probably 14 when she saw the video, and she came and she was like, "Mom, this is so cool, you know, look at this." And she shows me the whole video, and then she goes, "I don't even know what Gillette is, but do you buy that?" And this was the thing, right? She's like, that emotional connection that she formed to that story was so strong that she was like, "I don't even know what this product is, but can you get some?" Right? Because
Wow.
yeah, good video, right? Good job, Gillette, otherwise known as Gillette by my daughter.
Yes.
But like, I think that this is true, that this is the impression that people and brands and companies can either make on us or not make, right? Like I'll share an example. I was years ago, so before I did Reverb, I was in a job transition. I was looking at some job opportunities in Seattle, and I saw a head of people for a local engineering tech startup. And I spent my whole career in tech, right? So often the only woman in the room, or it was like me and the executive assistant, only women in the room. And yeah, that's fine. But I was like kind of tired of that, and wanted to go on to a place that was a little bit more diverse. Company sounds super interesting. I went to their website, and it was a team of, you know, like 18 to 25 young white men. And I just was like, no, I just, you know, I just didn't, I was not energized by looking at a very homogenous website page of people. And yeah, like I didn't want to be the first woman. I didn't want to be the first person to get there and be like, hey guys, right? Like, why aren't we more diverse? Like, where are the women? You know, where are the people of color? And I felt like, because often that initial conversation is met with resistance, right? It's not that I can't plow through some resistance, but I just looked at the picture of the team and I felt an immediate sense of fatigue, not energy. And
Wow.
you know, I didn't apply for that job, and that's just one example. But I think when we think about our imagery, our brand, our leadership team, like what are we doing as an organization as we're building and growing? To Caroline's point, like these things have a tremendous impact that we might not, like, nobody ever got that feedback from me. You know, nobody ever heard, oh, like these people are looking at your website and they're not drawn to your jobs for this reason. But I can't have been the only person who looked at that website and had that experience, right? I can't imagine.
Yeah.
It's 5:15. Kylie, where are we at? What's happening?
What is happening? Oh my gosh. Well, first of all, Caroline, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Kylie.
Always a pleasure to chat with you. So we were thinking about going into some breakout rooms just to chat with, just to connect and network a little bit. But before we do that, I'm gonna pause the recording.